What software do you use? Did you use an online software?
I use Astro Gold, I think it
yeah.
is, on my phone and other Apple devices. Yeah, Astro Gold.
They probably would be location. It's a button.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Yeah. So, let's see. For some reason, that's not showing up yet, so I don't know if you're, if he's logged, yeah,
Right, I see.
help him get logged in. Oh, there we go, thank you.
So now, let's go to Zoom, share. I think, if you could allow the sharing there.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're doing sharing, we're doing this one. And now we put this. License. Thank you. Okay. So,
All right.
yeah, so I think they can, I think they can see it there.
Yeah, okay, great. All right. Well, we have, they're not showing up on the screen, but that's okay. We're happy to have Robert Tippett here, long time ago member of MAAS, and he's here to talk about the Star of Bethlehem, and we're just so very grateful for you for coming all this way to talk to us, and it will be recorded. It looks like you're recording it also?
Yeah, I'm filming it.
Okay,
I'm
so
posted
we're gonna be
online.
recording it also on Zoom, so it will be uploaded to our website at some point in the relatively near future. Take
Okay.
it away, thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you all for coming and zooming in to see what I have to offer tonight. And I want to thank the people of MAAS for keeping everything going in Atlanta Astrology, and President Catherine Silverton and the board for giving me the invitation to speak about the Star of Bethlehem. This is a topic I feel is important and should be shared. And I hope you'll find it interesting and informative as astrologers and students of astrology. Due to the scope that I will cover, I will tell my personal story. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, I just had to turn the recording on, okay. Thank you.
And hopefully have us all become part of the various elements of the Christmas text, like invisible participants. And to do this, I will be scripted to adhere to the time allotted. So please make notes for any questions that can be addressed at the end. Thanks. All right, now let's see if this works. We're gonna go long. Okay, this is a reproduction of some basic required coursework at Georgia State University for a bachelor's degree in philosophy. And to analyze philosophies, knowledge of logic and critical thinking rules is necessary. Philosophies are opinions formed that should be analyzed for validity and practicality. Thus, logic provides the rules for developing solid opinions. What I offer tonight is my opinion based on logic, and I invite everyone to check my math. As you can see, there is no one opinion that says what the Star of Bethlehem is, nor is there one opinion about what year Jesus was born, much less a specific birthday. Still, here I am about to express my opinions on what the Star of Bethlehem is and the specific birthday for Jesus. Simply as a matter of logic, anything I say must be judged by my credentials. That requires me to explain my past. To save time, I recommend everybody read the bio on the MAAS webpage for tonight's meeting, and also have a website named Katrina Pearls, www.katrinapearls.com, that has an about page and more insight to me can be found there. Of relevance to typically recognized credentials, I have no advanced degrees. I have not published any scholastic papers about my opinions relative to recorded biblical history. I am not a distinguished member of academia. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I am still currently enrolled in the School of Life. From that school can be found my strongest qualifications, which are knowledge of astrology and some knowledge of logic and critical thinking. Relative to potential bias that could cloud my thinking, I openly profess to be Christian. I am non-denominational and have spent the majority of my life unchurched, but I have history with the Assemblies of God and Episcopal branches of Christianity. That said, what I offer tonight as evidence in support of my opinions is not mainstream education. It requires someone with some level of understanding of the art of astrology. While I will present an amazing natal chart later, one that basic students of astrology should be able to grasp, it is important now to establish how Pluto transits have symbolized the qualification I possess that only other astrologers can appreciate. In 1990, I began to experience the reality of transiting Pluto conjuncting my natal sun in my 10th house. My career was out of control and I was helplessly faced with unwanted changes. Knowing astrology, I looked for understanding of this time of difficulty that was symbolized by Pluto. Astrological books on the topic warned of a superior power that is best not to fight. The advice I found was go with the flow. I did that, and here I am today. Atlanta has a Plutonian history. Sherman was the embodiment of Pluto with his Union Army, his Cerberus. Atlanta fought rather than surrender, and it was burned to the ground. From that demise, the symbol of Atlanta is the phoenix or firebird, where rebirth from its own ashes reflect Atlanta today. Here is my chart with the transits of Pluto marked by month and year. By the time Pluto entered my 12th house, I was almost risen from my own ashes, but my physical rebirth still needed some spiritual modifications. It is important to understand this element of life that is represented by the 12th house, because this is where psychic intelligence can be sensed. My life became significantly more psychic, where insights like mental whispers led me to seek proof for what I was thinking. On January 1st, 2000, the internet not only survived Y2K, it began to expand. Knowledge became more and more readily at one's fingertips. Over time, that would become my ally. Internet intelligence has offered me credentials. On April Fool's Day 2001, I was fired from my job without just cause, and being fired was a first for me. I was forced to retreat and reassess, sacrificing self for income. While looking for work, I had a sudden insight about the meaning of the traditional planetary rulership model. And for the first time, I spoke publicly to a group of astrologers. I spoke convincingly about something I did not understand 2 months prior. My Astrology 101 book offered a page about that topic, which could have been read in 5 minutes. I offered the beauty of the depth, that is, the meaning of that traditional rulership model. Still unemployed, September 11th, 2001 ushered in a psychic understanding of Nostradamus for me. That was the first step of a long journey that I am still traveling. April Fool's Day 2002, I began a new job that meant lucrative employment. But I found I was helping a company steal from poor people. That presented a moral dilemma with strong humanitarian desires rising within me, while a voice in my head kept saying, "When will you finish writing about Nostradamus?" I quit that position and became voluntarily compliant to a life of service to a psychic power, which clearly meant embracing poverty while trying to make it known what was being shown to me spiritually. By 2003, I was destitute, and forced to move back home with my elderly mother. Back in my childhood bedroom, I wrote about the meaning of Nostradamus. I did that obediently and was led to find the perfect job, which allowed me the ability to write and pay debts. That job came through divine intervention. In 2004, I met the woman who would become my second wife through what can only be defined as spiritual assistance. As I wrote about the meanings of the prophecies, all pretense I held about becoming a wealthy author completely vanished when I was placed at ground zero for Hurricane Katrina. What few things I still possessed at that time, thinking I needed them, they were forever lost. I had lived in Mississippi less than a month, but had moved everything I had there. FEMA saw me as a non-entity because I had not changed my driver's license, and because I boarded with an elderly woman, I had no bills showing I lived in a permanent address in Mississippi. All I could do was smile. My full devotion to this psychic servitude meant I was rewarded spiritually by the woman who had entered my life, who I identify as the truth of a soulmate. She was led by a higher power to find me, and I was led by the same higher power to follow her. That led me to her church, which was Episcopal. In 2006, we became physically joined in marriage and spiritually joined in ministry, which in 2009 became the publishing partnership we named Katrina Pearls. I became a house husband to a wife that was a vice president for a company she co-founded. She willingly afforded my ability to write full-time about Nostradamus. In my work with Nostradamus, I have been led to realize the prophecies were written in a divine syntax. This is the cover of the book we published in 2010, while transiting Pluto was between my natal moon and ascendant conjunct both. Nostradamus paraphrased Jesus in his preface, equating the prophecies with divine scripture, relative to how Jesus said in Matthew 11:25, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and have revealed them to infants. That says the Bible, as well as the prophecies of Nostradamus, places the truth before one's face, but it is impossible to see the deeper intent without divine assistance. I found the Episcopal lectionary, similar to what all universal Catholic churches have, as being organized by people who were infant souls, thus able to have the hidden things of truth revealed to them psychically. I saw this because I had become fluent in the systems of Nostradamus, and when I read the handout for the lessons each Sunday, I was seeing the hidden things that should be what a priest's sermon is built from. The priest my wife and I listened to never taught the deeper truth. I tried to help them see it, but I had multiple Bible study groups go on hiatus rather than meet and deal with my offerings, which the priests had no response for. This led me to begin writing my own interpretations of Scripture based on the schedule of the Episcopal lectionary, and through deep discussions with my wife, it led her to see a need to commit to becoming an Episcopal priest. She wanted to fill a need in her church for an infant priest that could teach others how to see hidden things. In my case, I published my books and created websites for my articles on Nostradamus and Scripture. And for me, this was reflected in transiting Pluto through my 12th house. It was not because I was wise and intelligent. I had become the ashes of my past, reformed as an infant soul. In 2013, my wife was ordained by the Episcopal Church, and the voice in my head suggested I commit to writing analyses of every potential reading offered by the church's lectionary schedule and write pretend sermons delivered to an imaginary bus stop. That was a 3-year commitment to their A, B, and C cycle of yearly readings. This means this psychic credential that possesses me is not recognized by most. This is because such insight does not come with diplomas and certificates of achievement. Therefore, it must be questioned logically. With that background presented, in early November 2016, I was closing in on completing that 3-year plan. One Sunday morning, I sat alone in my wife's church reading the selected lessons for that day. They had nothing to do with the Epiphany readings, which tell of the visit by the Magi. For whatever reason, my mind suddenly veered to a revelation that had never come to me before. As an astrologer, I kept the art separate from religious beliefs. Suddenly, the two merged, and this seemed so simple. The star was the sun, and the Magi had cast a natal chart as astrologers. A door had opened, and as transiting Pluto in my 12th had conditioned me, I went to see the unknown. My initial thoughts had nothing to do with a plan to go home and blindly attempt to reproduce an amazing natal chart. I had no idea how to do that. Instead, I was more focused on how senseless it was to think Magi from the east traveled in darkness a great distance. The star, being the sun, cast into a natal chart, eliminated that need to assume travel by darkness. This had me going home and checking how many times the word night appears in the biblical Christmas stories. It only appears once, relative to shepherds. Nowhere is night connected to the Magi or a star. The Greek word for night, niktos from nux, can also translate as evening. That translation allows for more light and less darkness. Logic says traveling by night has greater potential for danger. This quote from Jesus references common sense. That then led me to another logical realization. Children are shepherds, and children do not tend to flocks in darkness. It is dangerous for both children and sheep to be in the fields when predators come out. The Aesop fable about the boy who cried wolf pointed out this was a boy, not a man. The boy cried out during the day. David tended his father's flocks as a boy, the youngest of Jesse's 8 sons. He was called from the fields during the day in order to meet Samuel. The reality is this: shepherds place their sheep in sheepfolds before it gets dark, where the sheep are watched by adults overnight. The children shepherds then go home for dinner and sleep, returning when the sun rises next. This is a picture of an actual sheepfold in Bethlehem, Israel, taken from the internet. This means there's truth to that written, such that the word night is better translated as evening. The Hebrew clock is divided into 2 equal parts, day and night. Day is from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Night is the opposite. The last 3 hours of day and the first 3 hours of night are termed evening, evening of day, and the evening watch. This means sunset is closing in then year-round. When the Earth's northern hemisphere is tilted closer to the sun, there is spring and summer. The date of the winter solstice comes on December 21st or 22nd. The nights are longest then. An internet search finds that around December 25th, northern hemisphere sunset is at 5:03 p.m. That means Hebrew day would exist until at sunset, was just at sunset. The term civil twilight refers to how much light was still available to do outdoors activities safely, and at that time of year it would be dark and unsafe around 5:19 p.m. That means on December 25th it would be dark as night while still being technically day according to the Jewish clock. This means the truth of shepherds tending flocks by night would have to be after spring before fall. The timing of Moses and Pesach, or Passover, is the advent of spring. Passover begins on the first full moon after the vernal equinox. The commanded festival of Shavuot, or Pentecost, is in late spring, 50 days after Passover begins. A month into spring, means sunset is typically after 7 p.m. with civil twilight lasting until 7:30 p.m. When a date in late spring is seen as May 25th, associating that time with Moses bringing down the covenant, it can still be light enough outside for normal activities until after 8 p.m., which is at night. Anyone want some gum?
No, I'm good, thank you. Knock yourself out.
This had me realize the logic of Jesus being the Son of God. In all logical arguments, the beginning point must be agreed upon. Relative to historical Jesus, it must be agreed that the Holy Bible offers truth, not flawed, biased opinions. If Jesus is the Son of God, then his birth must support that divine origin. All researchers that produce scholastic papers about the Star of Bethlehem accept this, such that historical records must support the Bible as true from facts. Thus, one must see Jesus, the Son of Man, Christ, or Messiah, as divinely created. This means it would be logical to assume Jesus' birth would not be by chance or random. It would be according to God's divine plan. Logically, the symbolism of the time of renewed growth on earth, spring, would coincide with his birth as by plan. This would be when the sun provides longer periods of light and less darkness. Logically, Jesus would be born when the sun was high in the sky at day, because Jesus is said to be the light of the world. And this would be most symbolic between 11 a.m. and high noon. Logically, Jesus would be born on a Sabbath, because God blessed and pronounced that day as holy. When Israelite history is connected to the festivals that Jesus is said to be the Lamb of God, his birth would be reflected in the history of Moses. Logically, Jesus would be planned to reflect the timing of Moses bringing down the law from the mountain to be offered to the descendants of Jacob. Jesus was planned to be symbolic of a new covenant given to the people, and that timing would indicate Shavuot, or Pentecost, in late spring, when civil twilight allows plenty of light in the evening watch of night. This brings out the logic that can be deduced from the biblical record, where Herod's decree meant Joseph would have to take Mary to Bethlehem to register for a census. The time to register would be flexible, and midwinter would not be when travels for that purpose would be planned. Israel has its normal rains in the winter. Because Scripture says the parents of Jesus traveled to Jerusalem for Passover every year, it makes sense they stayed nearby until Pentecost every year. So logically, that would be when Joseph planned to register for the census, meaning that time frame would be when Jesus was born. This makes it important for Christians and non-Jews to understand the Hebrew calendar. There is a civil calendar which aligns with the Roman calendar. But there is also an ecclesiastical calendar where Hebrew years change when Nisan, spring equinox, begins. Nisan is similar to the sign Aries, making the ecclesiastical calendar match the zodiac cycle. The festivals of Passover and Pentecost are so close together, it makes sense that if one had family near Jerusalem, then family bonding would eliminate the need for back and forth travel. With so many pilgrims and limited rooms to rent, leaving Jerusalem after Passover would not guarantee a space available for a return for Pentecost. The festivals of Passover and Pentecost are connected by a counting of the days. And I believe Joseph's brother lived in MAAS, near Jerusalem, so Joseph would routinely stay with him for that time. To keep Mary from prematurely delivering a baby, she would walk from Nazareth to Jerusalem and then remain there with Joseph's relatives. Since Joseph was born in Bethlehem, it makes sense that he would have other siblings who were also born there, then moved away as he did. The character Clopas, or Cleopas, was Joseph's brother, married to another Mary, and they lived in Emmaus near Jerusalem. With Mary 16 and pregnant with her first child, the purpose of a census would be connected to the commanded festivals that required a trip to Jerusalem. Joseph would plan to catch two birds with one stone by registering for the census while normally in Jerusalem near Bethlehem. Logically, if Herod required all male sons to also be registered in the town of the father's birth, Joseph would wait as long as possible, hoping Mary would give birth to Jesus. So with a new son, he could then register himself, his new wife, and baby at the same time and not have to come back. Knowing when Mary became pregnant, says her due date would have been expected to be closer to Pentecost than Passover. A trip to register for a census in Bethlehem, along with the wife and soon-to-be baby, would be a reasonably short trip from Emmaus to Bethlehem and back. Knowing Pentecost was near, and still no baby born, Joseph would go to Bethlehem at the last possible moment, planning on returning to Emmaus so all could go to the temple in Jerusalem together for Pentecost. The aspect of there being no room in the inn speaks of pilgrims filling every available space, and Joseph not planning to stay the night in Bethlehem. Because Mary would have been near term, Joseph would have let her ride a donkey as he walked alongside. Once they arrived in Bethlehem, Joseph would have placed the donkey in a cave stable while he and Mary went to the registration office. After registering himself and his new wife, on the way back to the cave stable, Mary's water broke. Joseph would not be expected to deliver the baby, and Mary, as a 16-year-old, would need help. That means local midwives would be called to give this assistance as a logical assumption. Thinking Joseph and Mary were pilgrims, the townsfolk would have asked, "Where are you staying?" And Joseph would have said, "I paid to stable a donkey, so that will be where we're staying." Unlike a sheepfold, a stable would be covered and caves were utilized as such. Because Joseph would have paid to stable the donkey, that would have been his rented space where Mary would deliver Jesus. The newborn Jesus would be wrapped in cloth and placed in an animal feeding trough or manger. The angel that appeared to the shepherds said, "Today was born," or "this day was born," and by not saying "this night," that states the birth was earlier, before 6 p.m., while the shepherds were out in the field watching over their flocks by day. As they were bringing their flocks in, it would have been after 6 p.m., thus night, but still light enough outside to do normal activities safely, civil twilight. So the shepherds could experience an angel, an apparition, on the way to putting their flocks of sheep in the sheepfold. Afterward, they would go into town, inquiring about where a baby was born in a stable and placed in a manger. The townsfolk would point to where the baby in the manger was, giving the shepherds enough time to go share their angelic experience with the parents, see the baby, and still get home before dark. The shepherds visited within hours after Jesus was born, but the Magi did not arrive in Bethlehem until days later. The evidence of this is told when we read Joseph, Mary, and Jesus were moved into a house. That says the inns were no longer full, and that logically says Pentecost was passed, sending the pilgrims home. It also means, since Joseph and Mary were not residents of Bethlehem, Mary was still not able to travel after giving birth. So a room in a house afforded her more comfort towards recuperating. Pentecost means 50th day, which the Jews keep up with by a counting of the omer. An omer is a dry measure that refers to an amount that each landowner gathered of fruits that were the first fruits from the field, which were placed in the temple of Jerusalem until an appropriate time when those first fruits will ripen and become edible. That count lasts 49 days. The offering of the first fruits is then done on Pentecost Sunday, which is the festival of weeks. That counting of the Omer begins on the first evening of Passover, the beginning of Passover day 2, so there are 7 weeks from that point before Pentecost. This is why there are 7 Sundays in the Easter season leading up to Pentecost Sunday. This matches the time it took Moses to lead the people from Egypt to the mountain he ascended, staying there 40 days before coming down. He came down on the 49th day, with the people choosing to obey the covenant, becoming true Israelites on the 50th day. The day before Pentecost is always a Sabbath, fulfilling the logic that God would have his son be born on that day of the week. With all of this deduction that flooded my mind, I needed to find a source of information that would allow me to determine what year this could have happened. I found an abstract of a scholastic paper published by a Frenchman named Gerard Guteau, and his paper displayed timelines that were most valuable. I must say, I entered the search data, and this was the first web page that came up. The data provided by this paper was enough for me to establish a year for Jesus' birth. Thus, I did not go look for other papers that might contradict what I found. I went with what information I was provided. This is my combination of his data into one Excel file. The detailed charts presented by Gerard Guteau are the left and center portions, with my additions on the right. The element of a census is key. The charts of Gerard Guteau list 4 censuses, but one is too early and one is too late to be considered for the birth of Jesus. Using his dating of the general census, which he listed as 10 BC, I had a start year. That year needed to match the biblical records. That meant finding a resource that produced Hebrew calendars that far back in time. I found a couple, but the one from Church of God Study Forum proved to be the most accurate. This pointed to 9 BC as the birth year, which converts to minus 008 Julian calendar. The Gerard Guteau timeline lists the census ordered by Herod as in 10 BC, but that year did not match the expectations of a divine birth. On the other hand, 9 BC did perfectly. Notice the red numbers for the weeks that are the counting of the Omer. In 10 BC, there were 53 days before Pentecost became the 54th day. The date of Pentecost is 10 BC, in 10 BC was 10 Sivan. Normally Pentecost is 6 Sivan. However, in 9 BC, the true 50th day was 6 Sivan, with the 49th day in the counting of the Omer being 5 Sivan. This does not mean Gerard Guteau was wrong about his general census of 10 BC. That date can be explained as records maintained in Rome and Jerusalem recorded a census approved by Caesar in 10 BC, with the implementation of that census for the Roman calendar year that is recognized as 9 BC. This confirmed the Sabbath before Pentecost occurred on 5 Sivan, which was May 25th, 9 BC, according to the Roman calendar. The Hebrew year was 3753, which began 1 Nisan on March 25th. To confirm this, I found Astrodienst provides ephemerized for ancient times with 9 BC listed and shown to be minus 008 Julian calendar. They show that May 25th minus 008 was indeed a Sabbath. Having thought nothing about a chart up until I had a year to focus on, I now have logical data to enter. 11 o'clock to 11:30 a.m., my estimate of time when the sun will be high in the sky would go along with Bethlehem, Israel, and May 25th minus 008. Many astrology books use examples of celebrities whose birth data is available to cast charts and analyze them. My computer program includes a demo file of such famous people. Knowing the biographies of people means chart analysis can be practiced by students of astrology to see how the complexities of aspects and planetary placements are read, matching the known history of a native. There is no demo file with Jesus' birth data because it is unknown. There will be no discovery of a birth certificate to confirm his birth. Still, the history of Jesus is recorded, so a natal chart for him must support that which is known. At one time in my past, I had the idea, what if Jesus was a Pisces? I then entered some blind data into my computer program and came up with a chart that looked something like this reproduction. Again, it was a blind stab and a wild guess, which had no logical backing. Still, if I entered logically discerned data for Jesus and came up with a natal chart looking like this, I would not be standing before you tonight. I would not attempt to defend the chart like this publicly. A favorite musical artist from my younger days is Kate Bush. I found out her birth data long ago and cast her chart. This is a reproduction of that. I remember she had a grand cross, which is a major configuration. However, look at how complex her life must be. You have to look closely to see the significant grand cross hidden in this splash chart. Here her grand cross shows as being in Cadent houses, but I saw some questions on the internet about the accuracy of that birth time. A different time of birth puts the grand cross in succeedent houses, and that could make more sense. Accuracy of birth data is a logical argument that can be made. If the chart I produced for Jesus was this complex, however, I would not be here tonight trying to defend it. I would keep it my private opinion. I had no expectations of what I would find. I just wanted to glimpse what the Magi would have seen. Because Jesus was born over 2,000 years ago, one must realize that astrology is what astrologers recognize today in the West is not the same format as what existed then. Hindus still use rectangles rather than circles. Whatever the format, the same vision of celestial alignments is conveyed and interpreted. This is where the divine syntax always applies. Whatever symbolic depiction the Magi used to calculate future events, it had the same meaning to the Magi then as a computer-generated natal chart has on us astrologers today. My computer program accepted the data I entered, and this is what appeared after I edited out the modern planets. I did a chart for multiple times between 11 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. This one is at 11:15 a.m. This is a very remarkable chart of 7 orbs and 2 points, plus the descendant. All but Jupiter and the Moon are part of a mega T-square, a major configuration. The standard red lines depict squares and oppositions, creating aspects forming a clearly marked isosceles right triangle involving the angles. The triangle can imply a trinity, especially when the Father, Saturn, and the Son, Mars, focus on the midheaven. The way the midheaven, Venus, Sun, Mercury spread out their collective conjunction and form a square to the opposing Mars and Saturn gives the impression of a tent. That can be seen as a visual depiction of the tabernacle in which the Ark of the Covenant was kept. The complexities of this chart dissolves to a minimum. It clearly is a mega T-square at the angles. The reality is this chart it strongly projects a cross like the Romans used for crucifixion. The Greek word stavros is equally used to tell of a cross that was placed in vineyards to support vines so they would produce good fruit. When Jesus said, "You must take up your cross and follow me," this is more a statement about raising one's abilities to support good fruit than a prediction of a willingness to die on a Roman cross. The T cross itself becomes a symbol of the Trinity. where the third point is where the horizontal, the spiritual, joins with the vertical, the physical. Now look at this chart when the outer planets are inserted.
Can you pause 1 second? Can you pause 1 second?
Your PowerPoint isn't moving, on Zoom.
Do you have any idea how we can fix that?
It's like it's not
Wow.
showing the presenter.
Amazing how it was working with you.
I know,
Pushing the
it's,
It's- I'm not sure because
here we go, now it's working.
Oh, good.
that should, is it? Let's see.
Yeah, I'm seeing it now from my computer.
Okay, it's something with about the presenter view then that
Okay,
isn't translating across Zoom.
How long has it been doing it? The whole day?
Probably
yeah, I'm afraid so. So we might ask you if you could share the PowerPoint
Okay.
for people that want to, watch it again.
if we could continue in this, if you wanted, I can move the slides manually for you.
How do you move the slides manually?
I'll take control of the mouse and just move it down to the next one. If we can present from here.
Okay, well, I mean, can I change them?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Just put it right there, because it closer makes it work better.
Okay, sorry about that.
So is this showing up on full in the?
Yes,
Zoom?
yes, it is, uh-huh.
It might be easiest just to hit the down arrow key to change slides.
Okay,
If you just hit down and go to the next one.
okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, sorry about that, but thank you.
Now, this is a chart calculated at 11:20 a.m. with the outer planets plotted. Look at how Pluto and Uranus join in the T-square configuration. Neptune becomes like Jupiter and the Moon outside it. The red triangle gets bolder. Down arrow. Look at the aspectarium for this chart. It is a chart that screams, if this one lives, then this one will be almighty. Out of adversity comes greatness. The function of Magi would have been to forecast for the king of Babylon, then of the Parthian Empire, where they would cast charts of the future positions of orbs. That would have been used to advise Phrades IV in advance, like a yearly prophecy before the Farmer's Almanac. This chart would have made them see an important birth coming. This is then the star that led them to Jerusalem. Because the Christmas stories tell of angels appearing and telling people what amazing thing was coming or just happened, it would be a logical deduction to think the Magi also had some guidance about this chart they cast. There are no Babylonian documents supporting this, like the biblical records that tell of angelic guidance. So logical deduction substitutes for clear evidence. As such, the Magi were warned in a dream not to go back to Jerusalem to see Herod. So they took another way back to Babylon. This means it would make sense to assume the Magi had divine assistance in understanding this forecast alignment, which then motivated them to petition Phrades to go to Jerusalem and anoint the new, quote, king of the Jews, end quote. They were skilled in predictive arts, but they were guided by interpretive dreams, 12th house symbols. Phrades was fearful of Herod and surely would have financed a caravan to comfortably carry the Magi to Jerusalem with plenty of attendants. because the Magi saw Herod as the father of this one, his natal chart, Phrades would want to make Herod aware he wished him well with his new son, thinking he would be the next king of the Jews. The fact that the Magi arrived late for a birthday, they knew well in advance, says they would have arrived on time, but they were unfamiliar with the festivals held in Jerusalem every year. They were unprepared to find the city with all its inns filled, as well as all the streets of the city clogged, making it worse than expecting to drive quickly through Atlanta at rush hour. It would be logical to see how Roman guards would stop anyone not a pilgrim, turn them away, or have them camp out until Pentecost had passed. That says the Magi caravan got there on time, but they were prevented from meeting with Herod until all the pilgrims had left. When the Magi gained entrance to meet with Herod, one could expect they prearranged a meeting while waiting outside the gates. When they asked about a newborn, this says they cast a natal chart. The use of star did not startle Herod, prompting him to say he too had seen a mysterious light in the night sky and wondered about it. Asking to see the one, quote, born king of the Jews, end quote, means the Magi assumed Herod had a wife who had given birth, but Herod heard what they said and called for his scribes. Knowing born king of the Jews was relative to Hebrew prophecy, Herod called for the scholars that knew such things. To say Jerusalem was disturbed with Herod says Herod was faced with the possibility that the Messiah had been born in Jerusalem by one of the many pilgrims in town, and digging through Jerusalem's records would then trouble many. When thinking about what the Magi said to Herod, they indicated it was this star of him, which is an individual identification. They did not say, the star we saw in the west led us here. Being in the east, to have seen a physical star in the east would not lead them west to Jerusalem. They would have traveled to Persia. Thus, they did not see a physical star. Looking at how the east is depicted in an astrological chart, and how rising can mean a chart ruler or dispositor, that makes the language of astrology be misunderstood and read as common. This is how astrology is written in the Holy Bible, hidden from the wise and prudent, simply by divine syntax rules, the language of astrology, not being applied to see it. When the scribes came and reported that the Messiah was to be born in Bethlehem, a small town, that eased the trouble for Herod in Jerusalem, because there would be less birth records to search through there. Then Herod wanted to meet privately with the Magi and get all the birth data they had. Herod wanted the data to give to his own astrologers to confirm and ask them why they hadn't seen this and warn him before strangers came with the news. That valuable information would also allow Herod to use it to secretly plot to kill anyone born in Bethlehem under the age of 2 that he didn't like. Most likely, Joseph traveled to Jerusalem on Pentecost after Mary had given birth and met Cleopas and Mary, telling them about the birth. Then the whole family would make arrangements for transporting the mother and child via wagon from Bethlehem when she was able to travel. Because Herod knew how packed all surrounding towns were during the Passover and Pentecost festivals, he doubted any baby born in Bethlehem was still around. So he told the Magi to go look for the child and let him know where he was so he could go pay his respects. Being 2 days after the planned birth and realizing the birth could be the pilgrims who left town, when the Magi reached Bethlehem, they cast a horary chart. That made the chart, that made the quote, star stop over the place where the child was, end quote. Astrology takes a snapshot of time, freezing it for analysis. Nothing stops in reality. The earth keeps on rotating and all the luminaries, planets, and stars keep on moving as usual. This is what makes astrology an art, not a science. This would have been what the Magi saw in a horary chart. Look at how the moon, symbolic of the mother, has now joined the T-square configuration. The bold red triangle just got bolded. This is why Matthew 2:10 says, when the Magi saw the star, they were overjoyed. The Greek word astera means star, but when understood as synonymous with luminary, this can mean they saw the moon and were overjoyed. This is then followed by Matthew writing, having come into the house, they found the child with Mary, the mother of him. Mary is the moon. Jesus is Mars. And the Magi found moon conjunct Mars. However, if they arrived and cast a horary chart at 11:37 a.m., the moon was conjunct Mars in the 12th house, still conjunct the ascendant and Pluto, and at 11:37 the Saturn-Uranus conjunction slides into the 6th house, still conjunct the descendant. To revisit the angel appearing before the shepherds, reading, quote, suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel praising God, end quote. The Greek can equally state, suddenly an assembly of celestial luminaries belonging to the sky appeared with the angel. Christians singing, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, has us conditioned to imagine the sky filled with a heavenly choir that is singing Christmas carols. By tweaking the translation of the Greek, what appeared to be a celestial choir can now be understood as planets and luminaries that suddenly made their presence available to the shepherds. At 6:15 p.m. night, this reverse